Joining us now is Greg Keshian, Senior Vice President and General Manager for Security Performance Management at Bitsight. Greg, thanks for joining us today on Dark Reading News Desk.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
Appreciate you joining us. We are talking about SPM. Companies have so much focus and attention on their attack surfaces. Let's start with some of the catalysts that you're seeing that are driving some of this attention here.
Yeah, so there's a huge focus on companies protecting their digital infrastructure and attack surface, really driven by a lot of what we've seen over the last couple of years since the start of the pandemic, where companies' attack surfaces have expanded really rapidly. So what you've seen is, people working remotely in less secure environments. You've also seen massive investment into digital transformation.
Sure.
Companies spent about $2 trillion on digital transformation initiatives, and that all leads to these significantly larger attack surfaces and perimeters that need to be secured.
Not to mention the expansion with the work from home phenomenon thanks to a recent global pandemic.
Exactly right, yeah. And so, employees of companies are now working on devices and in locations that you may not have been aware of. Processes are moving online, all stuff that CISOs and security professionals need to secure, but they're not always responsible for creating or setting up, and so they need to become aware of it.
What's Bitsight doing to address this problem?
Yeah, so Bitsight has a really significant investment in a couple of areas. One is within our security performance management suite of products, an investment into external attack surface management. And so we're constantly discovering the digital infrastructure and assets that companies have, mapping them back to that organization, and then also finding issues, vulnerabilities, other exposure problems that you have on those assets so that security leaders have an understanding of what the attack surface is and then how to prioritize the work to keep it secure.
That external attack surface management space is a crowded one for sure these days. Talk a bit about how Bitsight differentiates itself there.
Yep. So one is our scanning of assets, where really from day one of becoming a Bitsight customer, we have a full view of all of the infrastructure that your company owns and needs to protect. We also have a very significant investment into vulnerability research so that we can identify products that could be compromised, zero-day events, critical vulnerabilities that you need to secure. And then lastly, we also really have a leadership position in understanding your supply chain so that when a major security event or a zero-day attack happens, it's not only your infrastructure that you need to protect, but you also have to understand, is my supply chain compromised as well?
All right. The governance framework, of course, is a key piece of that picture. Tell us a bit more about that and why it's so important to include here.
Yeah, so our security performance management product is built on kind of a base of external attack surface management. So you understand your infrastructure, the exposure issues on it, and you can prioritize the remediation that you want to do on that attack surface. But then what we do is we roll that data up into very useful metrics to understand the performance of your security program across different dimensions. And so really what we're trying to help our customers do is get to the root problem of why you had an exposure issue in the first place, so that you can put in the right governance and process so that that issue doesn't just keep happening. You're not just constantly playing whack-a-mole with these issues. You're actually improving the process and making your company more secure over the course of time. And then also being able to report on that, benchmark yourself against your peers, trend your performance over time so that you can see those improvements.
So this is a larger issue than GDPR or HIPAA or the compliance legislation that has reshaped the governance?
Yeah, I mean, the regulations are a big part of it, and it's a kind of a force that CISOs across the market feel that they need to be in compliance with. But regardless of that, they also just need to drive strong performance in their security program, and they need good metrics that tell them whether that's succeeding or not.
The governance piece and compliance has also driven much more of a board of directors involvement in security strategies and
Absolutely.
that sort of thing. How does that show up for you and your peers on a day in, day out basis?
Yeah, so we see our customers all the time taking Bitsight data and metrics to their board meetings, because a huge problem that exists is boards of directors are increasingly needing to engage in conversations about cybersecurity risk, but unable to really engage in the conversation productively if the conversation is all down in the technical details. So the Bitsight rating and risk vectors and ability to benchmark your performance against peers are critical to having a productive conversation between a CISO, security team, and the board of directors to actually understand the risk level and the performance over time.
It sounds like what you're describing is helping the security people and the directors have a more productive conversation by bridging the big language gap, I guess, between those two cultures.
Yeah, and we all know this, cybersecurity risk is really becoming a material business risk. You see this in the new rules that the SEC has adopted in the last couple of weeks, where companies are actually going to be required to disclose how they are overseeing their cyber risk in their board meetings, and they're going to need to disclose that in their annual filings. And so as we lead up to December 15th, companies are really going to need to get a plan in place of how do you have a productive conversation about your cyber risk with your board. And in our view, and we see this in our customers, bringing Bitsight metrics and peer benchmarking to that board conversation helps you really identify, do we have an issue here? Do we have things under control? What are the investments that we want to make sure that we have the strongest program possible?
Sounds like we might need to add the legal department to round out the three-legged stool here.
That's right. Yeah, legal teams, chief risk officers, risk teams, they're all involved in this conversation, and that's why it's more critical than ever to have, independently assessed, comparable, trendable metrics that can be brought to the table to have this productive and objective discussion about cybersecurity risk.
Kesh, talk to us a bit, close us out with some thoughts around how an organization can better manage its own external attack surface.
Yeah, so it starts with an understanding of what you have in the first place. And so you need to have a constantly updated list of your external facing assets. So you need discoverability. Then you need to understand, what do we want to actually prioritize in order to remediate the risk that we have across this large attack surface. So you need to understand both the importance of the assets that you have and also the severity of the issues that exist on them. And then you need to be able to kind of assign out the work to your team to be able to remediate those issues and then track the results over time. It's really important to have that full visibility, and you need to do that not just across the infrastructure that you own, but you need to have an understanding of this across what we call your extended attack surface, which is represented by your vendors, your supply chain, all of your third parties.
Right. Well, tremendous insights on the dance between security performance management and the external attack surface management. Greg, thanks so much for joining us today on the Dark Reading News Desk.
Absolutely. Thanks, Terry.
We've been talking with Greg Keshian of Bitsight. This has been Terry Sweeney for the Dark Reading News Desk. Thanks for joining us for this segment. We'll be back shortly.